Welcome to Unity Connect Online, brought to you by Caligo. My name is Eric Ruthruff, and I'm the producer for today's presentation. Welcome to Select Star Twitter Analytics on BI Focal. Presenting will be John White, Dave Feldman, and Jason Himmelstein. This session is being recorded. The guys will turn their webcams on right now and unmute their mics.
Hey, John.
How you doing, Jace?
I'm doing all right. It looks like you're at home today.
I am at home. You look like you're at a home.
I am at a different location than my normal.
Okay.
Although I think I've done this show from London. Did I do it from Sydney? I don't think I did.
No.
I'm never in my home, John. That doesn't happen.
I'm always in my home. What's wrong with that?
And the benefit of being your own boss, what can I say?
Doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt.
Oliveira. I'm sorry, Ollie. That was my bad. I know who your boss is.
Awesome.
It's a pretty cool day. I flew from San Antonio. I was actually home for a whole 6 days. Flew from San Antonio up here to Boston. I was too excited. You and I get to present a half-day pre-con on Monday, and I just had to get here early. So
yeah, I know. I'll see you there. I'm going to drive over because I haven't had enough driving recently. So I'm going to hop in the car on Sunday morning and do the 9.5-hour trip to Boston.
Well, there you go. Well, I'm very lucky to have roped in our guest for today because I needed a place to do the show. And I decided, hey, maybe we could just do the whole thing from your house and your home office. So little pull my friend Dave here in. Dave, you want to start your webcam up?
Hey, guys.
So,
How's it going, John?
Good to see you again, man.
How's it going, Jason?
hey Dave, how are you? We're doing a little weirdness thing here, and it's messing with John's head, I think, somewhat as well, because we're in the same room but using two different webcams. So I think we're on opposite sides of John in some of the views. So hopefully we're not messing with you guys too much on the screen here as well. So a couple of points before we get really kicked off into the normal bifocal show. We have a Q&A module. There's also the chat module. We're all taking a look at the chat. We'll take a look at Q&A as you post them. We're going to tell you guys a story today. So as we go along with the story, please feel free to ask questions. We love the chat, so please you can use that and talk to us. We'll all, when we're not talking, be answering in the chat. But we're gonna tell you guys a story today. But before we do, John, we have some news to share.
We've got a little bit of news as part of our regular show. I'm just going to bring it up here. I thought I had it.
Well, so since the last time you and I had the dear pleasure of talking publicly, at least in front of other people,
That's
or
right.
On a webcam, the awesomeness that SQL Server 2016 released.
That's right. I think we were both away. I certainly was away. I was in Zagreb on the day, actually presenting on what's new for BI in SharePoint and SQL 2016. So I thought that was a rather interesting timing. But yeah, on June 1st, we've got all the full release version of SQL 2016. So we've been talking about it for a while. Now we can start using it. So if you've got BI in your SharePoint farm, now you can move to 2016. Well, I'm not going to say without worrying, but you'll be supported.
And certainly, it's quick and simple and easy, and it's no hassle at all. It's
yeah, we took out Excel
some magic fairy dust along the way, and it just happens.
You just install over top, and everything's fine, right? It's just an automatic, yeah.
All right, for those of you out there who can't tell that we're being facetious, that is a bunch of crap. It's not easy to do. It's not quick. It's not simple. There's 100 and something page white paper out there about how to actually do it right from the SQL team. So make sure that you know what you're doing before you actually do it. You can come here, John and I talk about it on Monday at SP TechCon here in Boston. We're doing a half-day pre-con. So if you're going to be in the area, come by. John loves hugs. Make sure you come give him a great big hug. So I do too. We're both huggers. But yeah, please be sure to come by and hear our take on all of that. But so a couple of things that are inside of SQL Server 2016, but not quite what we were hoping yet. I know PBIX rendering is not happening yet.
Yeah, there's two biggies that we were hoping for the release. They didn't quite make it into the release, but they will be coming very, very soon. And that's, as you mentioned, PBIX. And for anybody who's uninitiated, PBIX is the Power BI desktop file. So for a long time now, people have been asking, when's Power BI going to be coming on-prem? Well, it's not in all likelihood as it stands. However, the file format that we use to publish Power BI reports, PBIX, will get rendered in SSRS, SQL Server Reporting Services 2016 and above. So good news, you'll get effectively Power BI on-prem, but you're not going to get it until the first big feature pack. I don't know when that is. I expect it will be toward the end of the year. Along with the PBIX rendering, Power Query refreshing, both in analysis services. So if you author your data model with Excel and use Power Query to do it, then you import that model into analysis services. You're not going to be able to use that Power Query refresh, unfortunately. Not yet. That is coming. But that also goes for Power Pivot for SharePoint. So again, workbooks authored with Power Query can't auto-refresh yet. That's kind of the bad news. There's lots of good news, but I always look at, I've already bought the product. Tell me what's wrong with it.
Well, the other big thing about SQL Server 2016 that's different for SharePoint folks is there's no more BI edition.
That's right.
There's no more Server plus Cal option. The thing that they did differently here is that they actually put a lot of the goodness that we would be looking for in a smaller fashion into the standard edition. So they looked at it and said, this is silly, let's change. I'm assuming that's what they said. They could have used much less pretty language than silly, or it could have been in French. I have no idea. But they decided to do away with that SKU model, and now it is always like core, and its standard edition has a lot of the goodness that we're looking for in that as well. So,
yeah, particularly tabular model support. That's the real big thing. Up until now, if you wanted to use tabular models, which are those things we build with Power Pivot, you had to have an Enterprise or the BI edition. So BI edition's gone. Oh no, they're forcing us to use Enterprise. No, actually, they've added tabular model support to standard mode. So that's. So
if you want to know more about that, check out our previous show, the last one, just for this one. We went into deep detail all about the on-prem story about SSAS. It was really awesome. So be sure to go check that out. You can go to itunity.com/bifocal to go check that out. Other things that are important in here, there's no more AdventureWorks or Northwind Traders, John. What the heck?
No, we got a whole new sample data set to learn, and it's supposed to highlight all of the great new features in 2016, as well as show the things that have always been available. Now we have, wait for it, drum roll please, welcome to the worldwide importers. And it's a series of databases, data cubes, data models. They're all available on GitHub, and I'm just going to post the URL for that in here. So if you're used to working with the sample databases that come with SQL Server, they don't come with. We have to download it separately. I think that's been the case for a little while now. But now you're looking for worldwide importers. So we have another name to mock, along with Contoso, AdventureWorks, Litware.
My Spy.
Yeah, I believe that Worldwide Importers was actually, if I'm not mistaken, if anybody's a Futurama fan out there, I think that there was a competitor to the company that the Futurama kids all work for. And I believe that it was Worldwide Importers.
Oh, is that right?
I think. I could be wrong. I could just be making it up because it sounds fun. But so let's move along, just because I know we want to get to our story, which is why everybody's here today. The other things that were important, Power BI gets a notification center.
It does. So Power BI has been able to notify you by email when things like your refresh doesn't work. There are various other events that it'll occasionally notify you, but only via email. Now, much like Windows 10, with its notification center, the Power BI app itself has got a notification center. So I can, in one place, go in and see what's happened in my tenant while I've been away. It's kind of a small thing, but it's an important thing to those of us who use Power BI all the time.
Just answering Sydney's question here in the Q&A about who's projecting. Sydney, we're each going to take a little bit of time to share our desktop. So that'll happen automatically for you. Right now, you still see the splash screen along with our faces.
That's right.
So once we get to the point we're going to take over projecting, that'll go away. And Eric, you can actually just drop the screen share on your machine right now, and it'll make our faces full screen, I believe. But
I don't know that that's a good answer, to tell you the truth.
I agree. Sorry, folks. Blame Sydney because Sydney, he or she asked the question. Sorry to throw you under the bus there, Sydney. Anyway, other things, UPN mapping for SSAS.
Yeah, I touched on this briefly last time. The ability, one of the things we can do when we're connecting to SSAS, Analysis Services Tabular Models from the Power BI service through the Enterprise Gateway, did I just throw enough technologies at you?
I didn't lose you yet. Keep going.
Okay. It's the ability to take your identity and basically pass it on back to SSAS to give you row-level security on the back end. And that's great, and it's up until recently required you to federate your directory with excuse me, Office 365, which I know for you is no problem, but it's not necessarily for the faint of heart or for small organizations or for companies like mine where we don't even have an on-prem Active Directory. We only live in the cloud. So that's not the best. We had to deal with workarounds up until now. Well, now the Power BI service will let you map your UPN, which means the identity you're coming in with on the cloud, you can map it to what SSAS thinks, or actually an Active Directory somewhere thinks your identity is. So you don't have to get into UPN spoofing in your Active Directory that's in the cloud anymore. You can just map your ID straight up to SSA. So that's a big deal. That's been rolled out. And finally, just to cover off the last item, there's the new version of the gateway since the last time we talked, and basically we've added a couple of more data sources to it. So now we can do direct queries and refreshes from on-prem Informix and IBM DB2.
Woo, DB2! Two! Hopefully you're not having to deal with DB2, folks, but if you are, I'll share a glass of scotch for you. All right, so news complete. Let us do a quick intro of my good friend Dave here. Dave.
Absolutely.
We don't generally introduce our guests here, but we usually let them do it themselves, but I'm going to tout your credentials here. Dave and I have been working, we've been friends for over 20 years. We've been working together on different things. He brought me to New England in the first place and got me involved in SharePoint. It's his fault.
It is absolutely my fault.
Yeah, and so he and I worked together for 6 years, I believe it was, doing really cool SharePoint stuff. Then we wrote a book together. 3 times we wrote the same book. We had to write it 3 times to get it right.
Release after release after release.
And only published it once. But so Dave is an active member of the Boston area SharePoint community, as well as speaking on the circuit. But you could talk more about yourself. I just wanted to make sure we gave you the grandeur you deserve here.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I'm Dave Feldman, Boston Music Dave. If you want to find me on Twitter. I am a lover of all things SharePoint, Microsoft, Dev, Azure, Cloud, you name it, Power BI in a really big way. So excited to talk today a little bit about some of the fun work we put together when Jason calls me at 8 o'clock at night and says, hey, Dave, I need a little bit of help.
Yes, so let's craft a story for you folks. Way back when, golly, this was beginning of May, Microsoft has these calls that we get on as MVPs. So John and I were both on this call about a new product called Microsoft Flow. For those of you who haven't checked out Flow, flow.microsoft.com, really, it basically is IFTTT or Zapier for Microsoft. And it enables a lot of other technologies. But for right now, I looked at it and said, that's really a cool way for me to get data out of one source and put it into another for me to use Power BI against. That was all I really cared about. I've used it for a couple of other things since, but that was the main thing. So looked at that on Friday, thought, I'm going to take a look at that on Saturday. So Saturday morning, I woke up, went into my
This is
office.
day one of the public preview, Jay?
Yes, day one. So I went into my office at home because I was actually at home for a change and started tinkering. And I created a flow that went out to Twitter, looked at Twitter data, and pulled in Twitter at the hashtag SharePoint into a SharePoint Online list in one of my tenants. Thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I want to see what I can do with this. So I pulled in the data, and I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen now so I can find my share screen button. And here we are. So I'm going to hide my silly little notes here, and let's get to some data here. So I went into Flow, and what I did was I created a Twitter connection. And in this case, I'm going to show you, in this one, I've created UCO16, which is the hashtag for Unity Connect Online, this version of Unity Connect Online. And what I've done here is every time a new tweet appears, I'm going to query with this query text. I'm using an account, one of my many accounts out there. You won't be able to ever see anything I post to accounts, so don't even try. It's locked down. That's my swearing account. And take that, and I go and create an item in this SharePoint Online list. And what I'm doing here is I can go ahead, and I have to have the list already created, but I can now go in and grab the data out of Twitter that is the name of the person who tweeted, the text of the tweet, how many retweets it got, who it was tweeted by, their username on Twitter, a description, location. And since we did this, Microsoft has gone in. Well, first of all, we broke Flow. We'll tell that story in a minute. But they've added in a bunch of stuff that you can go after and capture here. So none of this was available on day one of the public preview. This is all new stuff that the Flow team is actively adding, which is really great. But there's, you can go off and just get the original text and who it was tweeted by, and all of that really cool stuff, what the original tweet ID or user's tweet ID was, and all of that stuff. So you can get some of the original core data because they noticed that they were getting a lot of retweet information. So that's handy stuff. So if I take a look at my flows, so this is Microsoft Flow. Here you can see I've got UCO 16 and this particular version. I'm capturing that hashtag going into a proper list here, and it's going into, and this has to do a drop down, and I'll go take a look at UCO 16, and that's the correct information, and it's actually hiding the rest of it at the moment, so I'm not going to mess with all of that. But what it does is it pulls in the information. I'll leave that page, and we'll go ahead and take a look at Power Apps and my UCO 16 list.
Naming your site Power Apps isn't too confusing.
Yeah, I know, but it was one of the ones I had sitting out there, so I've been using that one. So, Flow is meant to go with Power Apps, so it seemed logical at the time. I haven't used it personally that way, but so what I'm seeing here is I'm pulling in the title, the tweet ID, who the things were tweeted by, a retweet count, and a created at time. So this is all coming into a SharePoint list. Now, this was all Saturday, and I only had a little bit of time on Saturday, so I decided to ping John on Sunday morning to say, hey, look at this cool thing I did. Because what I did was I came in and I created a new view against the information. I had number of tweeters, number of tweets. I had some different filters. I was seeing some really cool stuff. I could drill into the data a little bit and play with it. I'm not going to apply my changes right now because I have something else open here I want to show you. But on the back side, originally what was happening, because if you take a look at this information here, what you're seeing is the decent look to the list, but what was actually coming back looked more like this. This div class equals external class, and then there's the actual tweet that we're seeing. That was really ugly trying to see that in Power BI. And so what we ended up doing was we limited the data down, and we actually did a transform of that data, and we restricted it So we're only seeing certain integers, and we cleaned up that data. On the right-hand side here, you can see we did a whole lot of different things along the way to that data to get it to a clean state. That was nice. It was really cool to be able to view this information in that fashion. I'm just going to close that and get right back over to my view. And it gave me this view here. Now, that was neat, but John wasn't satisfied because John's a perfectionist.
Oh.
I like throwing stuff against a wall and going, look, that was cool. Now let's see if you can do better. Oh, by the way, I also have the ability to say, was it a retweet or is it an original tweet? So I can see only those and clean all that up. So I thought that was pretty neat. I showed this to John on Saturday morning, and I went away for a couple hours. And John and I had a plan to come back together that night to go and explore a little bit more. We scheduled about an hour's worth of time. John, you want to take the story from here?
Yeah, sure. Maybe you can help me out here because, you're doing this. We got this event coming up, and we're like, mate, wouldn't it be cool, to capture some of the items from the event? It was your idea.
Yes.
To start capturing all the future. So the event I'm talking about is the release of SharePoint, the big announcement. Future of SharePoint that was happening on May 4th. And I just pointed out, that's cool. You can put it in a SharePoint list? Really? What's wrong with that? Well, I don't know. We might get more than, 5,000 tweets over the course of the future SharePoint event. And I think, 5,000 is about all that we're supposed to be using for that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we kind of broke that number a little bit.
Yeah.
I'll just show you. The future of SharePoint ended up with 37,666 items in that list before I stopped it. And the SharePoint hashtag, just SharePoint, was at 112,000. Microsoft was not particularly thrilled when they heard I had this number of items in this list. But I only got verbally spanked one time for it. So
that's good. Well, I'm going to leave that alone completely. The other problem with using SharePoint list data too is it's going to require a refresh. So what Jace did is he pointed Power BI to the SharePoint list and pulled it into Power BI desktop and published it out to the service. Now that's great, but we can only update the service up to 8 times a day in half-hour increments. So on the hour or on the half hour, we can get eight of those in. So over the course of the event, that might have worked, but over the course of a day, that means you're really, for the most part, going to be updating every 3 hours if you want to spread it over that 24-hour period.
And that's only if you're using Power BI Pro.
That's correct.
Is less than that. So
that's absolutely correct. And what you were doing was using SharePoint Online, which will allow a free license to do a refresh. But what I thought might be a better solution was, instead of putting it in a SharePoint list, why don't we put it in SQL Azure? And that gives us a couple of benefits. We don't have to worry about 5,000 items in a database anymore. And now we can use what's called direct query. So instead of pulling that data into the service and refreshing it every so often, the screen will be updated every time you do a refresh on your browser. So I'm just going to share my screen for a second, and this is fairly straightforward. I'm just going to walk through the basic steps of doing this. So I've got a Power BI screen up right now. Am I sharing? No, I'm not sharing yet. I'm sharing now. All right. So I'm going to start off with Flow. I'm going to go out to Flow. So in case anybody hasn't seen how, it's just simply at flow.microsoft.com. Come on, John. Because everybody likes to see you type, right? I thought, do I have it up already? No, I'll show them. Let's log it in. So it's automatically logged me in. That's fine. I'm going to go into My Flows. So you saw this on Jason's screen. And we've got one here for Bifocal, but I'll create one for Unity Connect as well. So I'm going to do that same thing, create a new flow. I'm going to come down here and pick Twitter when a new tweet appears. It's loading in. And what's my query test? It's UCO 16, right?
Yep.
You got it.
UCO 16. And you saw Jason do the change connection. I'm not going to bother with that. One of the things you can do is use the hashtag or not use the hashtag. If you want to restrict it to specific references versus the occurrences of the term, then you want to use the hashtag. Otherwise, you won't. So I'm going to hit plus. I'm going to add an action here. And I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and what you don't see anywhere here is SQL Azure. Why not? It's below the fold. There's a little load more button at the end, so that might trip some people up if they're doing it. But I'm going to go ahead and hit load more. Come down here and find SQL Azure. I'm going to insert a row whenever we get a tweet. And I then make sure I'm connected to the right instance of SQL Azure. So you register multiple connections within the service. I have a few. I'm coming down here to one called Weather Connection. Guess what I was using this one for first? Anyway, I have a weather table in here somewhere. You can see that. We've got streaming tweets, which you're going to hear about in a few minutes from Dave. And I'm just going to pick Twitter, which is the actual name of the table that I use, because we were being real creative at first. I have not bothered to go and change anything. So real simple, we come down here, we go into the retweet count, and I pick retweet count. It's the only numeric field, so it matches those up. I come down to the text, and I look for tweet text. And these tags are coming from the first action, obviously. So these are available basically to your flow at any point in time. Tweeted by is tweeted by. I kind of lined up the table columns as we created them. Created at is in here, but you have to hit more. So created at. Again, we come down to tweet ID. You're getting the general idea. And then down here we have search term. Now, search term isn't coming from the Twitter action. What I wanted to do is capture multiple different search terms, so I could filter on future of SharePoint, Power BI, SharePoint, etc., which is what we did. So in this case, we're searching for UCO16, and I'm going to enter that search term in here. It's declarative, but it works for our purpose because we can have multiple flows running, pumping into the same database. I'm just going to go ahead in here and Unity Connect Online, and boom, and create a flow. And almost instantly, that thing's going to start running. Almost instantly. There we go. When ready, hit done. And if someone wants to tweet out, we should see this here in a minute. Drum roll, please. But the next thing you want to do now is connect Power BI to that database. And that's fairly straightforward. I'm going to fire up Power BI Desktop. I am going to fire up a new Power BI Desktop. Don't save. There we go. Come on, let's go. It's always slow to start when you're on camera, you know. We're going to come in here. I'm just going to dismiss this screen. I'm going to go up and hit get go into recent sources because I've been into this database recently. There we go. This is our database. So this is a SQL Azure database. I'll actually really quickly show it to you in SQL Server Management Studio. Here it is, right? So you know we're not messing around. Here's the weather history, and then in here we have the tables with Twitter, weather data, streaming tweets, the same ones you saw in the flow before. And I'm going to say I want to pull in from Twitter. It's going to pull in all of the tweets that we want to. I'm going to hit load. Now, one of the things to be aware of is right off the bat, because this data source, it's a cloud-based data source that supports direct query, is I can import that data, which means it's going to pull it into the data model, which means I have to let the Power BI service do the refresh that I was talking about. Or we can use direct query, which means whenever we reload the page and execute a function, it's going to go back to that source data, which is what we wanted to do in this case, because we wanted to be able to see up-to-date information as frequently as we could. And I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. It looks the same once we've done that. But one thing you should be aware of when you're using direct query is that you become a lot more limited. There's a lot of functions you can't do with direct query. For example, if I come in here and go into the Power Query window, edit the queries, I'm going to come over here, and one of the things we had a little trouble with is this non-standard date format that Twitter gives us. We wound up having to solve this in DAX, but if I was to come in here now and just do a basic split column, we might want to separate the date from the time. I'm just going to pick by delimiter, and hopefully this doesn't take too long. I'm going to come in here and say custom delimiter, and oops, I'm going to just say it's space plus, so I'm going to separate out the time zone separator. I'm going to click OK, and bang, you can see it split my column into two, but the other thing you'll see is this yellow bar along the top. This step results in a query that's not supported in direct query mode. So it's not going to work for us. I could go back and change it to something we wanted to import, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and delete that step and just come back here and say close and apply. And then very quickly, I'm going to, just so we can see any tweets that have come out in the last couple of minutes, which I hope there have been, I'm going to come down here and hit our search term. I'm going to drag this down into my page level filter. Let that load in, and I don't see UCO Online, so we haven't picked any up yet. So as a different example, well, I won't be able to show you any of the new ones, but I was testing this out originally with SPC Adriatics. We're going to come down here, tweet ID, tweet text, and tweeted by. You can see here's basically some of the info. I was capturing this for about 10 minutes on a different conference, but that's basically how you connect to that back end data. Once I publish that, however, every refresh of that page will give us up-to-date information, which was great, right? We published out a really nice dashboard. It worked for Monday. It worked up till Monday night, I think it was. Am I right?
Yep.
And then what happened?
On Monday, what happened was that we kind of realized that this was great and this was really cool, but what we wanted was a live dashboard that was using stream analytics as well as SQL Azure. And I've known a guy for a long time who did this for something else that we did about a year ago. I think it was here in Boston. That I gave him a challenge and said, hey, I really want to be able to see this. This would be really cool. And so he spent a night and built it. So I knew he had some code lying around that could do something similar to this. So I called up Dave, and Dave, John, and I got on Skype and started playing and said, okay, Dave, here's what we're doing. Do you still have that code lying around? Here's a server. Go stick it on there and let's see what we can do. Here's an Azure account that's got some credit left to it. Let's see what you can do. So at that point, Dave, what'd you do?
So there's a couple interesting things. I had put together a couple samples. I found a few pieces of code that had been published online. And one of the issues that I had seen when you were starting to look at Twitter data is the fact that you can have multiple hashtags and multiple mentions inside a single item. So I wanted to create a solution that was able to basically multiply the rows. So if you had 3 people being mentioned inside a given tweet, I wanted to create 3 rows, but still have a unique ID so that you could be able to get a count. That would let you go after and be able to monitor for who is actually tweeting about UCO 16, who's tweeting about UCO 16 and Power BI, who's tweeting about SharePoint Longhorn as an example. To be able to get all of those and still get accurate counts. That had driven me toward a more code-focused solution that said, hey, I want to be able to get real-time data coming out of Twitter and drop those out in a way that I can see them live inside Power BI. So
John, I think we're going to stop sharing your screen now, and I think Dave's going to grab the screen and do some sharing here. Green button.
Absolutely. So I'm going to maybe start by giving a little bit of context around this, because there are a lot of moving pieces to it, but we'll show you kind of how this works. So there are 2 different pieces that we're really using inside here. One of them is called Event Hubs. This is a part of Azure, and basically it's a service that gives you a REST endpoint that you can go off and hit, and it's really designed to be able to just take in a lot of data. So this is used in a lot of IoT scenarios. If you may have millions of rows coming in, it's designed to scale really, really big and be able to handle that data ingestion very, very quickly, unlike a SharePoint list JSON. From there, what do you do with that data? So you get it in, you've got all of it going into some REST endpoint, you've got to be able to process it in real time, and that means before it actually gets written out to any sort of endpoint, before it makes it to SQL Azure, before it makes it into Power BI, maybe I want to do some sort of like time phase analysis, like every 10 seconds, how many cars are on average going through the Mass Pike toll booth. You want to do something where you have a really high volume of data, you want to analyze it, maybe do some transforms on it. We're really talking about stream analytics right there. That gives me the ability to be able to write to 1 or more different endpoints, and you can see we kind of highlighted Power BI as one of these, but you can also see in the Azure SQL database right here, something that I think John just kind of pointed out a second ago and said, hey, I'd like to be able to get my data there as well. So what we're really talking about is some sort of application that's going to go and call into the Event Hub and send the data from Twitter inside there process it as it's moving through Stream Analytics, and then be able to send it off to, in this case, both an Azure SQL database and Power BI.
And that was a really important part of this, and why we really wanted to talk to Dave about it, because we wanted to be able to do both. We wanted to be able to see the real-time dashboard of what's happening, but we also wanted to be able to take the data and analyze it later and break it down. And that SharePoint list with 35,000 items in it just wasn't as useful anymore. So SQL, being the wonderful tool that it is, was much better for that, especially once you get into the hundreds of thousands of items. We could take that database and hand it over to Microsoft and go, here's what you want to go take a look at. So we decided at this point, because we'd shown this off to a couple of friends at Microsoft by this point, with us not getting any sleep because we were just having way too much fun. We bleary-eyedly showed it to some friends at Microsoft, and they went, wow, that's really cool. Can you do this, this, and this with it as well, and then give it to us and be able to report on it for the event? Absolutely. And since the three of us were already going, we decided to go ahead and do that. So Dave?
So you can see Christoph Feisinger, one of the guys behind Groups, actually just tweeted out at about 20 seconds ago. So what's kind of nice about this is if you're actually just watching the dashboard, you can see new tweets streaming in real time. I'm not doing anything to go off and refresh. You can see the counts are changing. You can see we have new folks coming in. If you want to tweet about UCO 16, I'll give you just a couple more seconds to be able to get your tweets onto the screen. But you can see these things. Okay, we'll skip the profanity on that. We're going to go over and show you how this works right now, because I think that maybe that's a better idea. So what you see right here is you see a little command line application, just my Twitter client.exe. So this goes off, and it is a command line app. You could run this for real as a Windows service. You could run this, just about any way that you want to go write code and have it go execute. I wrote a command line app because it shows it off well, and that you can actually see the tweets coming in real time. So what we're doing is we're actually talking in code to Twitter's streaming API, and we're getting those tweets, and we're literally parsing out the JSON, the JavaScript object notation data that is being sent back by that Twitter streaming API. And maybe the one thing that is most interesting here is that it's a single call. Tweet.stream statuses. So we're going to keep that connection open to Twitter, and every time someone tweets, we're going to real time get that coming and hitting us. And from there, we're literally going to take those, and we're going to actually subscribe to that in our Azure Event Hub. So that's literally watching the tweets as they're coming in. So in real time, as these come in, every time you see this command line app do it, it's calling the Event Hub. The Event Hub is sending that over to Stream Analytics, and from Stream Analytics, we're making it over to Power BI. So I have this up in this right here. So this is actually showing you the monitor screen of Stream Analytics. So you can see how many events are going in, how many events are going out, any sort of exceptions that are happening, and this gives you a nice preview into what's actually going on. If I go over to the query, you can see this is the query that I'm actually using to be able to transform the data that we're talking about. And John, I think you've done a few of these as well, but you can see it looks pretty familiar, like normal SQL syntax, but it gives me a little bit of control over what data is going to go in here. So as an example, I'm taking the created at, and I'm parsing that out and saying, I want to break out the month, I want to break out the day, I want to break out the year, I want to break out the hour and minute, because I don't really have a modeling tool like Power BI Desktop to be able to control these. The only real control I have over how my data is going to go look is what I do right here inside this query. So this lets me do a little bit of a transform away from what Twitter gives us into something that looks the way we want it to. Going over to outputs, the other thing that's kind of fun on here is that you can have multiple outputs. So in this case, I've got my data coming in, and that's coming from the Event Hub. I've got that data stream. I've got my query that transforms it. And then on the output side, I'm sending it both to John's database, and I'm also sending them off to Power BI, which is what you're seeing on the screen when this goes off and comes at you live. So what's sort of fun about this?
I was going to throw it there, Dave. Why would you want to do that? Why would you want to have those two different data sources?
So I would want those both so that I have my real-time analytics, but I also have a full record of everything that took place. And SQL Azure Database does scale a little better than a SharePoint list, so we decided that would be a good place to house all the data long term.
And when you're streaming straight to Power BI, it's going straight into the Power BI data model, which can only really be used by Power BI.
Absolutely. So one of the things that's kind of fun about this, you can see we have a decent amount of traffic going through here right now, but I could actually just go stop this, and this is definitely something we can make slicker. So right here, this is an app config file, just a config file that's got my OAuth data on here, but I can also have all of the terms I want to go monitor. So as an example, maybe I want to look at some things that might generate more traffic than SharePoint. So I could look for Red Sox and Yankees as an example, or I could, that should be enough. So as soon as I hit play, we restart our little executable, and all of a sudden you can see the rate of data that we're streaming in here is going to be a little bit higher. So hopefully, if everything's happy.
Why would anybody tweet about the Red Sox?
I don't know. We'll start to see this jump a little bit. So you can see 4380. You can see our tweets are starting to move a little bit faster on here. So if we actually wait just a second, we should see that in the Stream Analytics dashboard as well. I just saw a couple Red Sox tweets go by as well, but you'll start to see it broken out inside hashtags. You'll start to see things if I want to expand out mentions as an example. We can pop that guy open, and you can see we'll start to get some different folks other than Microsoft and Mark Russinovich and things like that. We'll start to get some new ones as our data source starts to flow in there.
I got to quickly jump in just because I noticed you have a notification in your new notification center that I was talking about.
Oh, this is awesome.
I don't know that you want to go look at it.
I was going to say, can I? Awesome. I had a new stuff got added to this dashboard.
Yeah, so there you go.
And the fun is I got that same alert on my mobile device as well. So,
awesome. So what's kind of nice about this is you can run the code absolutely anywhere, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. So if you have a tweet that has 4 different mentions in it, unlike any of the other kind of solutions we looked at, unlike Flow or unlike putting it in SharePoint, putting it inside SQL Azure, I have the ability to have a little bit more control. So in this case, we're really making a row for every hashtag, for every tweet, and then we can use all the normal approaches that we've used in tabular BI, since Power Pivot, to say I want to count the distinct over here. I want to be able to do some aggregations to figure out how many people are talking about these different things.
Yep. Yeah, and another good reason to pump into both of those data sources is when you pump into the Power BI directly, you can really just use the browser to change the way it looks, the look and feel of the report or the dashboard. You can't get in and change the model. You can't, for example, go in and say, I want to use a comma separator for my number values like you could if you're using Power BI Desktop. There's really no way to get at it at the moment. So putting it in both gives us the best of both worlds, I think.
I mean, what's really interesting is if you've got any sort of internal applications, if you've got anything that generates just a huge amount of data that may not have an adapter today or may not have a way to be able to get that data in, you've got the ability to take any sort of transaction. This could be something with robotics. This could be, as your car is driving, being able to put real-time data in here from 1 million cars that are out there and be able to aggregate it, get some sort of real-time visualizations across this. It's a little bit more work than doing it via Flow, but I mean, it's not a lot. It's a couple days of effort to be able to put this together. And you can kind of see how this is able to scale and handle a lot more data as long as you have someone else's Azure tenant to go run it in.
I'm just glad you had a lot of it built by the time that May 4th event ran around, because the part Jason didn't mention was that the preview of Flow broke for us the night before the event. So we had to scramble.
Yeah, we did have a lot of fun doing this whole thing, and one of the interesting things was hearing the Flow team happened to have been at the May 4th event, so we had the opportunity to sit down and demo for them what we've done with their product, and in combination with other products from Microsoft. And Jeff Teeper came around as well, and to look over our shoulder and see what it was we were doing, which that was a pretty big thrill for all three of us, I think, was being able to demo this and say, what you guys are doing actually has some real world implications that we've been able to come up with. I will say Flow has been a fun tool to play with at this point. It's still in preview. It is brittle in certain aspects, but the team behind it is rapid response. When you find a bug, they find a fix for it really fast. Yeah. And the one that we found with when we broke this was a pretty big one for them to have to go off and tackle. But it was great that we found it, and we were there together with them. Since then, I've only broken Flow twice. I used Flow. I'm a big fan of using out-of-office messages in Outlook. So when I traveled to London the previous time, I went ahead and set up an out-of-office message, and I used Flow to go off and pump things into a Wonder List to be able to let me know that I had new emails that were important. So I put in an out-of-office message that said, if your need is critical, please email me again with this in the subject line. And Flow was looking for that in the subject line of my email. It took the email and took who the sender was and the date and time and stuffed that into Wunderlist. And so I had Wunderlist alerts coming up on my phone. Hey, John has something important. Go take a look at this email from this date and time with this subject. That was pretty useful.
Like I ever have anything important.
Well, this is true, but still, the concept was there. Scott Hogue had things that were important. Okay. So that was really important as well, our good friend Scott. So, I wanted to make sure I got those. Unfortunately, that kind of did break along the way. They were able to, within about 2 hours, put a fix into production that solved the problem, however. So that was pretty impressive. And you had one recently as well, Dave.
So I did. One of my favorite actions that you have inside Flow is the ability to send an approval email. For folks who came from the SharePoint background, like I did, you're used to a SharePoint workflow assigning a task, having to open the task, change the status on the task. Not the world's best user experience. So what's great about the modern experience inside Flow is it'll actually send you an email, and your options, as an example, approve and reject, will literally just be a button where you can go off and click approve, and the flow will continue on. So if you've got any sort of human workflow, you want to get approval on something. I know we've done that, wiring that up with some PowerShell inside a Logic app as an example that says, go get this approval and then go off and run this PowerShell once that approval takes place. So some really awesome stuff happening by the Flow team.
Yeah, so now that we've vamped for just a minute, John was able to get this the streaming data dashboard up that we actually used on the day of. The three of us were sitting in a row in the front row of the event, all of us with different devices open, looking at the data, looking at the streaming live, and it was really impressive to see the reaction of the Twitter community, because this was only one aspect that we were looking at from a social perspective, and what they were tweeting. I mean, almost 5,000 tweets an hour, right, John, at one point?
Right there. You can see it, right? And I've stopped the filter from a time standpoint on this, but you can see the build up to the event. And over the course, I guess, of 3 hours, they had just under, or was it just over 10,000 tweets?
Yeah.
The peak being 4,670 in one given hour. So that's rather interesting. But this is all coming in. This was all coming in relatively live. We got a ranking of the biggest tweeters. Jen wins. Jen Mason wins the most active. I don't know how she pulled it off. 124 tweets. She had
Jen's just generally impressive, so that's not surprising.
Yeah. And then this is some of the more recent. We have multiple pages to this report. This is, got some geographic stuff. Dave's built in some sentiment analysis. We're using the streaming stuff here, so you can see different topics and how the sentiment went over time. I'm not a big fan of sentiment analysis, but it looks pretty on a report.
I love TieGraph.
Yeah, well, TieGraph's our product. I think it had the highest sentiment. Everybody was happy that we launched
great product.
A TieGraph Office 365 product of the show. And I wasn't taking it out of the filter, frankly. One of the other things we were able to do is not just have this for ourselves, but to be able to publish this out. And we were using the anonymous sharing capability of Power BI reports. And to do that, it's very simple. Just go up here into the file menu, go to publish to web, and you grab the URL right here. And if I post this right here into our chat window, and that's a long URL. I would normally shorten it, but I didn't bother. You could go and see this report yourself. And at any point in time, that's one way to share it, right? The only problem with the anonymous sharing is that when you access the report, the first person to access is going to get a view, and that view is going to get cached for 1 hour. So that's not the best. So we would supplement this by taking screen grabs, maybe by popping out, say, the word cloud visualization. By popping out the word cloud, just taking a second, and then just grabbing a screen grab of that and tweeting that out itself, adding to the Twitter flow. So a little bit of recursive content creation, I guess.
It was some geeky fun, I will say
geeking,
that.
Yeah, we were definitely geeking.
So is there anything we missed in the story?
I think we've covered most of it off, and I think we're actually going to come in on time for a change.
And John, you did have a tip and trick that you wanted to share.
I did
today as well. I don't know if you can get it in the next 3 weeks.
I can. Real quickly, Adam. Oh darn, I'm going to forget his last name. Can't remember his last name, but he's has put together, one of the guys on the Power BI team who's does a lot of outreach. Has put together a video on how to set up test tenants in Power BI, and there are a number of steps involved. I'm going to post that into the room as well, and hopefully that's going to work. I have trouble pasting in from OneNote into this chat window, and I'm not sure why. Did it show up, Jace?
No, it sure didn't, John.
It shows up as an image here. I'm just going to go to the notepad.
Yeah. So Sydney asks, what if your CEO or board of directors can't process that amount of info? How do you roll it up to make it simpler? Well, there are lots of different ways that you can do it. We're showing some very granular levels of data here. You can do things like page filters. You can say, I only want to see people who tweeted more than 25 times. Right? Yep. So you could do things like that and be able to, and that would change the viewpoint here of, and that would be a page level filter. I've got some reporting that I do inside of Rackspace where I do that, where I say, you know what, I only want to see tenants that have more than 1,000 seats in them, things of that nature. So useful stuff.
I actually want to share one other view to sort of answer that question as well. I've done another dashboard to complement the one that John did. One of the things I like to do is actually pull out specific numbers. I find it's really easy, especially on the mobile device, to have something that's just an actual tile with a number on it. How many tweets happened on the future of SharePoint? How many tweets happened on SharePoint? How many happened on Office 365? How many tweets happened about Jeff Tieber? Being able to have a couple different views like that, you can also bring in other web content, photos, videos, be able to have a dashboard that tells the rest of the story as well. So that's kind of one other tip that one can do there.
Yeah, I was about to echo exactly the same thing, man. It's just simplify it. It really is, and I make this point when we're talking about designing dashboards. Know your audience. The dashboard of a 747 is totally appropriate for the pilot of a 747. But it's not appropriate for different people. So different people have different requirements in terms of what information they're going to need to do their job. The beauty of this is you can have multiple ones going against the same data set. So you can really satisfy everyone's requirement. But just to finish off my tip, I'm just coming in here. I'm going to grab that screen one more time, and I just wanted to show one other thing. This is part of setting up a test tenant in for Power BI. We've had a case with customers where they don't have any Azure Active Directory presence, but they want to try out Power BI. We've got a solution that we deliver on Power BI. We kind of need them to have it, and they have no real way of, in the short term, being able to do that. One of the nice things you can do with Azure is set up a separate Azure Active Directory in your tenant, and it's very, very simple to do. I'm just going to quickly pull up Azure, my management service screen. If I'm got windows open all over the place. Here we go. If we come down in here into Active Directory, you're going to see, here's our company's Unlimited Business Azure Active Directory. But if you wanted to, you can just very simply click New, go in here. I'm not going to go through the process, and create a separate Active Directory. You'll see one here, and it's going to have the .onmicrosoft.com, which may be perfectly adequate for your purposes. It is in our case, and you can start adding users to that. Well, those users can now be logged in to, but Power BI can use any of the users you create here. And don't forget, Power BI is free by default unless you use any of the pro features. Adding another Active Directory to your tenant is also free, and so this is all legitimate. It's a totally valid way to go. It's not just a workaround, not a cheap trick. Basically, is what it boils down to. So if you've got people you want to have use Azure Active Directory, they don't have any presence within your directory and your tenant, go ahead and add another one. It won't pollute your Active Directory, but it will let them use Power BI. So that's one way into the service if you can't just go in.
So John, would that be a good way to kind of handle external partners or folks who you want to share securely with on the outside? It
sure would. Now, again, if they have their own presence, we can work with that presence with Power BI. We can share with external users, etc. The downside of this approach is they won't have an integrated experience. It's yet another identity for them. But it's a way to get to Power BI because Power BI is dependent on that Azure Active Directory. So yeah, it's a good way to set up external users without polluting your Active Directory.
All right, so we are coming right up on time, and I want to make sure we end on time and give Eric an extra minute to wrap. Yeah. So with that, hopefully you guys have found this, and ladies have found this to be useful information. Dave, thank you so much for being here and for hosting me as a guest in your network.
Thanks for being at the end of the phone that Sunday night. Anyway.
It was a blast, man.
So, and we'll continue to do all sorts of fun things and publish them out there. John and I put out a YouTube series on what we did that Sunday morning and that Sunday evening. I finished up that about 4 o'clock in the morning that Monday morning, and then Dave got on with us that day. We haven't expanded that 3-part series, but you can find it at a bifocal channel on YouTube. Thank you guys very much. We're here monthly, John and I don't know who our next guest is going to be, John. We've had so many great ones. We're going to make it a mystery, but we will be back next month. So from John and I, and thank you to Dave, we're going to sign off. So Eric, over to you.
Thank you, guys. That was a great presentation. Thank you for all the attendees for taking the time to attend this. We will post a recording of this presentation to watch on demand. You'll be able to find that on the Unity Connect online on the agenda. You'll need to be logged in to see the recordings. Next week, Unity Connect Online will send you an email notification once the recordings are available. I'll tell you that the staff is working hard on getting all those done now. Registration for Unity Connect Online will be open for 30 days after the conference is over, so you can tell your friends and colleagues about any great session, including this one, and they can register and watch it on demand. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day.